On my 30th birthday, my father turned to me in front of 60 people, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "I wish you were never born." For a split second, time stopped. My chest tightened, my ears rang, and I swear the room shrank around me. I didn't shout. I didn't break. Something inside me just snapped quietly, like a thin wire pulled too tight for too many years. The next morning, before the sun even rose over Phoenix, I packed my bags, withdrew every dollar I had, signed a lease on a small apartment in Tempe, and disappeared without leaving a note. I didn't look back. Not once. Because when a father kills the last piece of hope in his child, there's nothing left to stay for. But before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you are. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection makes a hard story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. My name is Atlas Corbin. And if my story reaches you, please consider subscribing. It helps this channel grow, and it reminds people like me that our voices matter even when the people closest to us tried to silence them. I turned 30 in a tiny sun-bleached apartment in South Phoenix, waking up to the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something to break. I lay there staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how a life could feel this heavy and this small at the same time. 30 years old, a STEM teacher at a public school, no one in my family had ever bothered to visit, driving a used Tacoma with a dented door, and somehow still hoping stupidly that one day Magnus Corbin would look at me and see something worth being proud of. I had just wrapped a robotics project for a group of desert-side kids who built drones out of salvaged parts. They were proud, the kind of proud that shines in their eyes and sits warm in your chest for hours. I lived for that feeling. It was the only thing that ever made me feel like I mattered. So when my phone buzzed at 9 a.m. and my mother's name appeared, I almost didn't answer. But I did, and she said the words I least expected. "Atlas, your father wants to host a birthday dinner for you. Copperleaf Steakhouse. 7 o'clock. For a moment I thought she had called the wrong son. Magnus never planned anything for me. Still, that tiny foolish part of me, the child who used to stand in doorways hoping he'd say he was proud, tightened its grip. Maybe this was the year things changed. Maybe 30 mattered to him. Copperleaf was glowing with floor-to-ceiling windows and a crowd far too well-dressed for a simple birthday dinner. More than 60 guests packed the private room, shareholders, board members, partners from his Scottsdale resort expansion. They greeted Magnus, shook his hand, laughed at his jokes. I hovered at the edge like a stain no one knew how to acknowledge. Not a single happy birthday, not a single hug. My mother barely met my eyes. I sat near the end of the long table while Magnus and my brother Dorian monopolized the conversation with updates about the Sedona Resort project, permits, profits, investor confidence. Their voices filled the room. Mine didn't exist. When someone finally turned to me and asked, "So what do you do?" "Atlas," I opened my mouth to answer, but Dorian cut in with a smirk. "He teaches. You know, public school paycheck, public school dreams." A few guests chuckled awkwardly. I swallowed hard, telling myself Magnus would step in, correct him, defend me. He didn't. Dessert was served. I stood with my glass ready to thank the guests, to salvage whatever dignity I had left. But Magnus rose first, lifting a hand like he was calling a meeting to order. The room fell silent. He didn't look at the others, only at me, and with a voice calm enough to sound rehearsed, he said, "Atlas, you are the greatest disappointment of my life. I wish you had never been born." The room froze. My lungs forgot how to work. Shame flooded my skin so fast it burned. 60 faces stared, and not one person said a word. Not my mother, not my brother, not anyone who had toasted Magnus minutes earlier. I set my glass down, walked out without looking back, and the only sound behind me was the quiet scrape of forks resuming dinner. I sat in my dark apartment, still wearing the button-down I had ironed that morning, hands resting on my knees, staring at nothing and feeling nothing. No anger, no tears, just a hollow clarity settling into my bones. I wasn't part of that family, not really, and I never had been. If I stayed, I'd spend the rest of my life begging for scraps of worth they were never going to give me. I didn't want to beg anymore. At sunrise, I drove to the bank and withdrew every cent of my savings, 41,000 I had scraped together over years of living frugal, patching my own car, turning down vacations. By noon, I had signed a lease on a modest apartment in Tempe. By evening, I had changed my number, blocked every Corbin contact, and was tossing framed family photos into the dumpster. I kept nothing. I didn't need reminders of people who never saw me. While clearing out old files, I stumbled onto an unread email buried under spam from the night of my birthday. My breath caught when I opened it. Southwest Philanthropy Network. I had been selected as one of 3 finalists for the Southwest Humanitarian Leadership Award, an event attended by 800 leaders from business, politics, and education. And right there in bold letters, diamond sponsor, Corbin Hospitality Group, which meant Magnus would be there. Front row. I felt an unexpected steadiness fill my chest. Not revenge, not spite, something cleaner. The chance for the truth to simply exist. For once in my life, I wouldn't have to shrink. I wouldn't have to apologize for being who I was. I would step onto that stage and let him see me, really see me for the first time. Then came the second shock, a folder I had created years ago, Ignite Futures Initiative. My project, my students. 6 years of work done quietly, independently, funded by small grants and late-night side jobs. 140 teens served, 87% showing measurable academic improvement. A partnership with Arizona State University waiting on formal approval. And not a single member of my family had ever known it existed. As I pieced through the data, photos, student stories, I realized something simple and devastating. I had built more impact than Magnus had ever imagined for me, and he had never even bothered to ask. My phone buzzed, 15 missed calls from my mother, 4 from Dorian, another 5 from the house line. The final text read, "Your father is furious. You shouldn't have disappeared like this." That was it. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry for what he said." Only worry about how my absence made them look. I turned the phone face down, opened my notebook, and began drafting a 3-minute gala speech. My voice was steady. My hand didn't shake. When I walked into the downtown office of Southwest Philanthropy Network, the desert heat still clinging to my sleeves, I felt that strange mixture of exhaustion and purpose that had lived with me for years. Dr. Helena Brooks greeted me with her usual calm energy and handed me a folder thick enough to make my throat tighten. Inside was their projected funding plan if Ignite Futures won the award, multi-year support, expansion, potential university partnerships, everything I'd dreamed of, but never dared to say out loud. She spoke about impact metrics and scale, but my mind kept drifting to the kids whose faces filled every page. The little drone builders from South Mountain who had learned to solder wires better than some adults. The Navajo girl who whispered to me after class that she wanted to work for NASA someday, because someone like us should be up there too. The boy who nearly dropped out twice but found something steady and grounding in coding small circuits. They were the reason I woke up every morning, the reason I stayed late, the reason I kept going, even when my own home felt like hostile ground. But that week something shifted outside my control. Phoenix Herald ran a front-page feature, "The Teacher Changing Desert Youth." My photo was there, me kneeling beside a group of kids adjusting drone propellers. I didn't expect it to travel far, but apparently many people in the Phoenix business world read that paper, including several connected to my family. I knew because my phone buzzed with an unexpected call from Dorian. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't even ask if the article was accurate. He simply ordered Write Dad's speech for the gala. He needs something polished. When I refused, his voice sharpened. "Don't make him disappointed in you again." I waited for the old panic to hit me, the one that always followed his words, but it didn't. Instead, a strange calm settled in. I finally understood I had nothing left to lose. Later that afternoon, Dr. Helena forwarded me a copy of an email that had been sent to Corbin Hospitality Group's board. A major shareholder asked Magnus directly whether the Atlas Corbin in the Herald article was his son. I could almost imagine the shock rippling through him as he read my name, realizing the son he'd dismissed for years was becoming publicly associated with something admirable, something completely outside his control. That email, Helena said, would not be ignored. She was right. It was the beginning of a storm heading straight toward us. In the days that followed, I tried to focus on preparing for the gala. My old suit looked too worn, too small, so I bought a modest new one at a discount shop in Tempe. I practiced my speech 17 times, stumbling, restarting, revising. Several moments I felt the old fear creeping back, the fear of not being enough, but Helena sat with me after my longest rehearsal, her hand on my shoulder, telling me, "You're not performing for them. You're telling the truth. People recognize truth when they hear it." And for the first time, I believed her. On the night before the event, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and said aloud, "I'll walk out in front of 800 people, not for him, but for me." And the man staring back didn't look like someone begging to be acknowledged. He looked like someone finally choosing himself. The days leading up to the gala had a strange stillness, the kind that comes right before a monsoon rolls across the valley. I moved through my routines like a man hovering between two worlds, half anxious, half steady, as if the version of me who used to shrink around my family was dissolving with each passing hour. I told myself repeatedly that I wasn't stepping onto that stage to fix anything with them. I wasn't walking toward their approval. I was walking toward myself, toward the person I had quietly become while they weren't watching. After the Herald article, a local education magazine published a deeper profile about Ignite Futures. They had interviewed students and parents without telling me in advance. I saw photos of kids holding their first built drones, images of parents wiping their eyes as they talked about opportunity. It felt overwhelming and intimate in ways I wasn't prepared for. Then came emails from reporters wanting to interview me at the gala. I tried to ignore them, but a part of me knew this was bigger than I had expected. Public attention was something I'd never chased, but now it was finding me whether I liked it or not. Then an anonymous email arrived at the organization. Does Magnus Corbin know his son founded Ignite Futures? Helena forwarded it to me with a single line. "Someone is digging." I stared at the screen, trying to steady the rush of fear. I had anticipated this moment eventually, but not so suddenly, not in a way that threatened to pull my old life into my new one before I was ready. Still, it wasn't enough to pull me off course. Within hours, word spread through the Phoenix social circles. Friends of my mother reached out to her asking if the atlas in the news was her son. She sent me a long message. "Are you in trouble? Your father is furious about the article. People think the person in the paper is related to our family." Reading it, I felt something inside me settle into place. She wasn't worried about me, only about the noise surrounding my last name. That realization hurt in a quiet, clean way because it confirmed something I had always tried to deny. They never understood what I did because they never cared enough to ask. By midweek, a senior shareholder had called Magnus directly demanding clarity. Business media outlets speculated about internal conflict at Corbin Hospitality Group. For the first time in my life, my absence was more disruptive to them than my presence. But even then, I couldn't bring myself to reach out. I didn't want to be dragged back into that orbit. I was finally moving on a path I had built myself, so I kept preparing. I refined my speech again, focusing on opportunity, resilience, the brilliance of kids who had been overlooked. When I stood in front of the mirror, vest fitted on perfectly, I didn't see the forgotten son anymore. I saw a man who had learned to stand straight by standing alone. Hours before the event, I received a final confirmation email from the gala organizers. I would be backstage on the left side, appearing second in the program. The note was simple, clinical, but as I read it, I felt something shift. The moment was real, unavoidable, near. I put the email down, inhaled slowly, and said to myself, when I step onto that stage, everything will change. No matter which direction it goes, I won't be the same man who walked away from that dinner. And for the first time in my life, I felt ready to meet whatever waited for me on the other side. The afternoon sun was lowering behind the mountains when I walked through the service entrance of the Scottsdale Convention Center, the door thudding shut behind me like a checkpoint I could no longer turn back from. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint and cold air conditioning. My suit wasn't expensive, but it was clean-fitted and enough to make me feel like I belonged among the people gathering outside. My heartbeat picked up when I caught a glimpse of the massive LED screen rehearsing the Ignite Futures video. The kids soldering wires, the Navajo girl presenting her drone, the group of boys cheering when their robot finally moved. Seeing their faces 20 feet tall made my chest swell with something between pride and terror. Tonight wasn't just about me. Everything I had built would be laid bare. From the narrow slit between the curtains at the side of the stage, I saw the familiar silhouettes of the Corbin family entering the grand lobby. Magnus looked steady, collected, greeting donors as if nothing in the world felt uncertain to him. Dorian hovered near a group of young executives, laughing too loudly, trying too hard. My mother sat stiffly at the front table, her hands clasped in her lap, glancing at every door as if hoping I would suddenly walk through one of them. Watching her search for me stirred something deep, but not enough to pull me backward. I stayed behind the curtain, steadying my breath. Then everything shifted. I saw Dorian freeze mid-sentence as he checked his phone, his face draining of color. Someone must have sent him the Herald article again. He showed the screen to Magnus, who stiffened immediately, his jaw tightening as his eyes darted across the room. I watched the two of them whisper fiercely to each other, trying to keep their composure while panic seeped into their gestures. They knew. They finally knew. A few minutes later, Magnus stepped away from the table and slipped out into the hallway. I followed from a distance, stopping before he could see me. I heard his voice low, cold, and frantic on the phone with someone I recognized as his personal attorney. Why was I not informed Atlas was tied to this organization? If the press starts digging, the Sedona deal will fall apart. I need this contained now. His tone wasn't the voice of a father blindsided by emotion. It was the voice of a CEO terrified of losing face. That truth hit harder than anything he said at my birthday dinner. He had never feared losing me, only losing control. Backstage, my palms were damp, my breath unsteady. Helena stood beside me, calm as if she had walked through 1,000 storms. "You don't have to prove anything tonight," she said. "Just tell the truth." Her words grounded me more than she knew. The truth was the only thing I had left. Then chaos erupted in the lobby. A staff member accidentally handed the Corbin family the seating chart for the evening, one that listed the lineup of speakers, including my name. I heard my mother gasp. I heard Dorian push back his chair. Then his voice echoed through the entrance, "Atlas, where the hell are you?" He wasn't calling for me out of worry. It was the same tone he used to scold employees or demand attention. His anger spilled into the air, sharp and unmistakable. I stepped further behind the curtain as footsteps and frantic voices filled the outer hallway. They were searching for me not because they feared for my well-being, but because my presence threatened the carefully curated image they built their lives on. And yet, for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I just felt ready. A stagehand ushered me toward my mark as the lights dimmed for the Ignite Futures video. My heart thudded loudly in my chest as the opening music began to play, the screen glowing bright. I knew that when the video ended, I would walk into the open and confront everything I had ever run from. And in that last breath before stepping forward, one thought burned in my mind. When the screen fades to black, the life I knew ends, and the life I've been building begins. The moment swallowed me whole. From the shadows behind the curtain, I heard the MC's voice ring through the enormous ballroom. "Next, we present the Southwest Humanitarian Leadership finalist, founder of Ignite Futures Initiative." My stomach dropped as the opening images flickered across the screen. Kids in sunburned neighborhoods passing wires back and forth, hands covered in grease as they repaired salvaged parts, the classroom whiteboard filled with equations I'd scribbled during one of our late-night sessions. My own voice echoed faintly in the background of the footage, explaining to a student how voltage flows through a circuit. The room quieted in a way that felt heavy, almost reverent. When the words, "Founder Atlas Corbin," appeared across the giant display, the silence cracked. People murmured, chairs creaked. A few heads turned sharply toward the VIP table. Through the narrow curtain gap, I saw Magnus gripping his wine glass so tightly the liquid spilled over the rim without him realizing. His face was drained of color, his composure unraveling under the weight of something he had never prepared for, the truth presented publicly without his permission. Within seconds, he pushed back his chair and strode out of the ballroom. I caught fragments of his voice echoing down the corridor, urgent, brittle. "Call communications. We need a statement ready before Los Angeles picks this up. Do not let this spread." He wasn't angry at me. He was terrified of the fallout. Terrified this would stain the empire he had built. Terrified people would wonder why the founder of Ignite Futures wasn't acknowledged by his own father. Meanwhile, Dorian was shoving his way toward the backstage access. I heard him before I saw him, his voice sharp with accusation. "Atlas, this is going to ruin us." Security stopped him just short of the curtain. He shouted my name again, but I stayed silent. I understood now he wasn't scared for me or for our family ties. He was scared for the empire he hoped to inherit. Then came the moment. My name was called. I stepped forward, the floor vibrating under my shoes as the applause began. Not thunderous, not overwhelming, but real. As I approached the stage, I caught sight of my mother. She had risen from her chair, one hand slightly raised as if wanting to reach for me but not brave enough to complete the gesture. Her eyes were filled with something I had never seen clearly on her face before, fear, hope, regret, all tangled together. For a second, I felt the weight of 30 years settle heavily in my chest. Just as I reached the stairs, Magnus re-entered the ballroom. He stopped directly in the aisle in front of the stage, not moving aside, staring straight at me. His expression wasn't cold or dismissive like it had been so many times. It was confused, shaken, trapped between his role as a father and his identity as a CEO, desperate to stay in control. For the first time in my life, he didn't look untouchable. I continued walking. He didn't block me, he didn't speak. He simply stepped aside, but not gracefully, more like a man wrestling with something too big to swallow. I took my place behind the podium. The microphone waited silently. 800 people stared at me. My heart pounded hard enough to shake my ribs. I knew that whatever I said next would shape the rest of my life. It could break me, it could free me, it could tear open wounds I had never named. And in the stillness of that moment, I inhaled once and told myself, this is the moment everything changes. Then I opened my mouth to speak. For a moment, all I could hear was my heartbeat pounding against the microphone so loud it felt like it echoed through the entire ballroom. The lights washed over the audience in a soft gold haze, blurring most faces into an indistinct sea, except for 3. I couldn't escape even if I tried. My father sitting rigid with his jaw clenched, my mother hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white, and Dorian tapping his foot, refusing to lift his gaze. The silence stretched to the point where it wasn't just quiet, it felt like the air itself was demanding that I finally stop running. I took a breath and began the way I'd always known I would, with the story of the first student I ever taught. I told them about the quiet kid who stayed after class to ask how circuits worked, the boy who fixed his first motor with tape and hope, because no one had ever trusted him with a real toolkit. I said I wasn't standing here because I was extraordinary, I was standing here because those kids believed in me enough to show up every week even when no one else believed in them. As I spoke about opportunity and the unfairness of where you're born deciding your future, heads lowered around the room. People who had never stepped foot in the neighborhoods I taught in suddenly looked uncomfortable. At the VIP tables, guests subtly glanced toward my family, curious and cautious, as if they sensed where this might be heading. Then I shifted. There were days, I said, when I thought I was worthless because that's what I grew up hearing in the one place that was supposed to protect me. A wave of quiet rolled across the ballroom. My father's head snapped up. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Dorian turned away, blinking rapidly as he rubbed the corner of his eye with his sleeve. And Magnus tightened his grip on the back of his chair so hard I could see his knuckles straining. I went on. On my 30th birthday, my father stood in front of 60 people and said he wished I'd never been born. Gasps scattered through the room. Some people turned fully in their seats to stare at him. Others whispered into their napkins. The weight of public judgment hung thick, and for once, none of it was pointed at me. But I didn't stay in that moment. I told them that the humiliation hadn't destroyed me. It had forced me to rebuild myself from the ground up. It pushed me to step away from the shadow of the Corbin name and into a life I created on my own terms. I spoke about the kids who built drones out of scrap metal and old fans. About the teens who finally believed they were capable of more than the system had told them. About how Ignite Futures was the legacy I chose, not the one I inherited. And then, I closed with the truth I had never dared to say aloud. I don't need anyone in my family to recognize my worth anymore. Tonight, all of you already have. The applause came like a wave, loud, steady, rising until people across the room stood. I didn't move. I just breathed, letting the sound wash over me. My family stayed seated, frozen, silent. When I stepped down from the stage, Magnus was already standing in the aisle, blocking my path. "Atlas," he said, reaching out like he expected me to come to him the way I always had, but I walked right past him. I didn't slow. I didn't look back. And in that moment, the tether I had spent my whole life clinging to finally snapped. Leaders from universities, philanthropists, and donors surrounded me the moment I reached the floor, congratulating, praising, asking about partnerships. But their voices blurred. The only thing I felt clearly was a lightness in my chest, as if I had just stepped out of a cage I hadn't realized I'd been living in. For the first time in 30 years, the weight was gone. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of my new apartment in Tempe as I opened my laptop to an avalanche of notifications, emails from donors, messages from reporters, partnership proposals, and a dozen articles already circulating. Phoenix Herald ran a full front-page story about my work. Other sites picked up quotes from my speech. And in nearly every mention of the Corbin name, the tone was cold, sharp, and unforgiving. By noon, I learned that Magnus had been summoned by the board to explain his comment at my birthday dinner. Later that afternoon, a major Sedona investor pulled out of the resort project entirely, citing concerns about internal culture and leadership instability. My phone buzzed again, a message from my mother. "Your father is under heavy pressure. Everything is happening too quickly." Even then, her words focused on him, not me. That evening, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject line: "We need to talk." It was from Magnus. He wrote that he wanted to meet, that he wanted to support Ignite Futures financially, that he believed we could repair things if we worked together. I replied with only one condition: a public apology in front of the same people who heard him belittle me. He never answered. Days later, a letter arrived from my mother, written in her careful handwriting. She admitted she had failed me by staying silent. She didn't defend her choices, she acknowledged them. I told her if she wanted to understand me, she needed to see the work she had never asked about. She came to Ignite Futures the next Thursday. She walked into the robotics room and watched a group of kids cheer as their drone lifted an inch off the ground. She covered her mouth, eyes wet. For the first time, she saw me, not the version Magnus had shaped, but the one I had built myself. Not long after, Dorian emailed me a long, honest apology. He didn't excuse what he'd done. He didn't blame stress or family pressure. A week later, he came to an open house session, standing in the back of the room as students presented their projects. I didn't speak to him, but I saw something in him shift, a quiet humility replacing the defensive arrogance he always wore. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I was ready to see him try. Meanwhile, a business journalist reached out saying they had information about years of mistreatment by Magnus toward staff and family. They asked for comment. I declined. I wasn't interested in tearing him down. I had already walked away. Let the truth come out on its own if it needed to. I no longer needed to be part of that fight. Ignite Futures grew faster than I could keep up with. Donors contributed an additional $4.1 million. 3 new branches opened across Arizona. ASU formally requested a long-term partnership. Every classroom filled with kids building, dreaming, discovering. And every time I saw one of them succeed, I felt something inside me stitch itself back together. Then, after 3 weeks of silence, an email came from Magnus. It was short. "If you ever need anything, reach out." I deleted it, not out of anger, but because I finally understood I didn't need him. Not anymore. A week later, a board member from Corbin Hospitality contacted me privately. They wanted to create a scholarship fund with my name on it, an attempt to clean the company's image. I refused. Ignite Futures didn't exist to polish anyone's reputation, least of all theirs. It stood on its own, and so did I. When my next birthday arrived, the kids at Ignite Futures surprised me with a small celebration. One of my students handed me a card that read, "You're the first teacher who made me feel like I wasn't worthless." I stood there holding that card, feeling a kind of warmth that ran deeper than any applause the gala could offer. That moment healed what decades of silence had broken. As I left the building and stepped into the golden Arizona evening, the desert sun glowing across the horizon, I felt a peace I had never known. And in my final thoughts, spoken only to myself, I finally understood my own rebirth. I wasn't born into a family that valued me, but I was reborn the day my father said he wished I hadn't existed. And the life I built afterward, I wouldn't trade it for anything. In the quiet after everything that happened, I began to understand something I had never been allowed to believe. Sometimes the family you're born into is not the one that shapes you. Sometimes it's the one you build with your choices, your resilience, and the people who see you clearly, even when your own blood refuses to. My story was never about revenge, and it was never about proving anyone wrong. It became a journey about reclaiming the pieces of myself I had given away just to be acknowledged. It taught me that walking away isn't an act of weakness. Sometimes it's the first real act of courage. And healing doesn't always come from apologies or reconciliation. Sometimes healing arrives quietly through the lives you touch, the work you devote yourself to, or the single moment someone tells you, "You made a difference in my life." Maybe that's what all of us are searching for, not perfection, not approval, but a place where we are fully seen. A place where we don't have to shrink ourselves to fit into someone else's expectations. A place where the truth, even when painful, leads to something better. When I look back now, I don't see the anger in my father's eyes anymore. I don't hear the words that once shattered me. I see the version of myself who stood on that stage, finally unafraid, finally whole, finally choosing a life that belonged to him. And if there's anything I hope you carry with you from my story, it's this: you're allowed to choose yourself, even when it hurts, even when it means walking alone for a while, even when the people who should love you don't know how. Because sometimes choosing yourself is the exact moment your life begins again. Before you go, if this story reached something inside you, I want to ask you for a small favor. Not for me, but for the purpose of connection, the kind of connection I never had when I needed it. Leave a comment below. Just a word, a thought, a feeling. Tell me where you're watching from, or what part of my journey reminded you of your own. Maybe you're in your room late at night, maybe you're listening during a quiet lunch break, maybe you're sitting somewhere trying to breathe through something heavy. Wherever you are, your voice matters here, and I'm listening. I'd love to hear from you. And if you've stayed with me until now, thank you. Truly. Stories like mine don't spread because they're dramatic. They spread because someone out there recognizes themselves in them. If you want to hear more stories about resilience, healing, unexpected strength, and the kind of journeys that remind us we're not alone in the world, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us grow. It brings these conversations to more people who may need them, and it lets me know that sharing my story wasn't just an echo into the dark. Maybe you're someone who needed this today. Maybe you know someone who might need it tomorrow. Maybe you just want to be part of a space where honesty is allowed, where pain isn't dismissed, and where choosing a different life for yourself is seen as something strong, not selfish. Whatever your reason, I'd be grateful to have you here. So if my story touched you, even in a small way, hit the subscribe button. It's a simple gesture, but it tells the algorithm and me that stories about healing deserve to be heard. And if you feel comfortable, share this video with someone who might be walking their own difficult path. You never know whose life you might quietly touch. Thank you for listening, for staying, for seeing me. And wherever you are right now, I hope you choose yourself too.